Hello everyone, Rich Hagan here with Randy Buehler, Pro Tour Hall of Famer and also Pro Tour champion from Chicago 1997, which although it was extended, Randy, well that's essentially the modern of 1997. So this is your Pro Tour in that sense.
Sure.
Do you get extra excited about the modern Pro Tour each year?
Modern is awesome to watch. I really do enjoy Modern. I think it's a lot of fun.
We should start then, because we're going to get pretty deep on quite a lot of topics in the next 13, 14 minutes with you. What is Modern?
Yeah, it's worth setting the scene. There are a lot of cards legal in Modern. I mean, if you look at it, it's essentially the last, 10, 12 years worth of cards.
Right, 2004 kicks us off, right, with 8th edition.
Right, so very specifically, it's every set since 8th edition, which is actually the introduction of the modern card frames, which is kind of a useful sort of ballpark, keep things in mind. I believe we're now up to 50 sets.
Wow.
That are legal in Modern.
Okay, that's the list of what we can do. But there are a little few things about what we can't do. Tell us about how the banned list works.
Yeah, 50 sets is a lot of sets. And so R&D has, from the beginning, been kind of aggressive at making sure that the format stays fun and fresh and interesting and different. And, nobody's killing each other on turn 2. So 50 sets, but there is specifically a banned list. So there's a list of cards that you're not allowed to play in Modern, and that actually gives R&D the ability to shake things up like they may have done before this Pro Tour. So we can look at the list of banned cards.
And if we do that, so the big two, we've even given you, for those of you who have these decks built, you can sob as you look at this. Splinter Twin and Summer Bloom, these are the new exclusions from the Modern format.
Yeah, you will not see any of these cards this weekend, and Splinter Twin's a big change. That is definitely an impactful ban. It's going to shake things up in terms of the decks that you're going to see people playing this weekend.
Now, we should say that those two decks, Splinter Twin and the Amulet Bloom combo, they're not necessarily 100% dead in the water as archetypes.
Sure.
But they're just very, very different if we do see them put in an appearance.
I love the way R&D chose Summer Bloom as the card to ban out of that Amulet deck. Like, people call it the Amulet deck, but they didn't ban the Amulet of Vigor. You still can build an Amulet deck with the comes into play tap lands, the so-called Correos. I don't know if that's going to be good enough. I don't think that's going to be good enough, but it's definitely a space people can kind of mess around with. And similarly, Kiki-Jiki's still legal if you really want to try to pull off some sort of Splinter Twin-ish combo.
Okay. Now, although the format begins with cards from 2004, 8th edition and up, Modern as a format came to prominence in 2011 when the Modern Pro Tour era began. So give us a sense where we've been, a little bit of history.
I mean, the short version is Splinter Twin's been the best deck for 4 years, and it's not here anymore.
Right.
I mean, the more complicated history, the more in-depth history is a lot more interesting. I mean, there's been sort of a steady stream of decks. It has changed on a pretty steady basis, though. So for me, coming into this tournament, I think you really want to try to get the context of just the last year.
Okay.
I think the last year gives you all the context you need. I mean, specifically, go back 1 year ago, we're in Washington, D.C., was Pro Tour Fate Reforged, and we had a Pro Tour.
All right.
So if you look at the top 8 decks from that Pro Tour, there you see Splinter Twin and Amulet Bloom. You also see Abzan had a really good weekend. That was actually kind of a breakout weekend for Siege Rhino, in particular Siege Rhino in Modern. And the Burn deck was quite good as well. But, okay, that's where we were a year ago, but then we just told you that the banned list has been shaken up. So bye-bye first place deck.
Okay.
Bye-bye second place deck.
Yes.
And bye-bye third place deck.
Right.
Kind of a big deal. Top 3 decks from the last Pro Tour just aren't legal. You're not going to see them, or certainly not in anything resembling the form that they used to take those top 3 spots last year.
All right. Now, we have one Modern Pro Tour a year, so is that our last piece of useful information, Fate Reforged, or have we got more since?
No, the Grand Prix are awesome, and Modern Grand Prix just are awesome. I think Modern might be, honestly, it might be the best Grand Prix format. Sorry to the booster drafters out there. I'm a big booster draft fan myself, but it's a great format at the Grand Prix level, and there have been 7 Grand Prix since the last Pro Tour. So if we just look, starting from last year at the Pro Tour, what has done well across the Grand Prix circuit, it's a pretty interesting mix. It's actually a ton of different decks. Fully 23 different decks have made top 8 of a Grand Prix in the last year, which is 7 events. But once again, look at your headliner, right? There's the Splinter Twin deck. It's the only deck that's won 2 Grand Prix in the last year. You see some nice depth here. I actually was a little bit surprised when I put the data together. Tron's only got 1 top 8. People are talking about how there's this opportunity for Tron to come take over the world now that the Splinter Twin boogeyman is gone. I mean, if it was that good, wouldn't it have more than one top 8? I don't know.
Well, Tron has a lot of fans. People who would love for it to be good and want it to be good. So, there's an element of that. Whereas, Affinity players are just ruthless accountants. Let's be honest here. But Tron players are like, oh, I'd so love to go 2-5-7 and start making Khan Liberators and all sorts of gigantic Emeralds.
Sure.
It's a sexy deck, Tron, right?
Totally agree. You look at that Grand Prix top 8 list, though, and you made a good point there, I think, with Affinity. Once you take out the Splinter Twin deck, once you take out the Amulet Bloom deck, right, those decks are gone, they're X'd out. Affinity is by far the most successful deck left from the Grand Prix level.
Okay, now we took out a couple of decks because of the banned list, but guess what? Although there were 50 sets, a little while ago, there were only 49. So why don't we talk about the 50th? Tell us about Oath of the Gatewatch and whether this small set, 185 cards, is going to have a real impact on Modern, because historically, we wouldn't necessarily expect that.
No, it's a great point. I really think there's two big things that have shaken up the format in the last month or two. One being the bannings, but the other being the release of Oath of the Gatewatch. It turns out there's some pretty cool Eldrazi in Oath of the Gatewatch.
Why don't we take a look? So we have Thought Not Seer.
Thought Not Seer, I think, is the headliner. I think that's the guy that's getting the most attention, but it's not like it's just Thought Not Seer, right? Reality Smasher is large and hasty and hits people really hard, hasty. Eldrazi Mimic can be fun. All of your Eldrazi Mimics from your hand can be played off one Eye of Ugin, for example. Follow up with a Reality Smasher, and that's a lot of damage. Matter Reshaper is the kind of grindy card people like to play in Modern. There's a lot of cards. Gatewatch is also really good. The land that allows you to draw cards. Seagate Wreckage, sorry. Seagate Wreckage is a great card, especially if you're in a kind of grindy matchup. You get to the mid-game, you're just empty-handed, refill.
Yep, 2 at a time there. And then, of course, we have Kozilek, the Great Distortion, which, again, a real fan moment. We just love to see that in play, whether it's limited or modern. Let's be honest, because that's a really great card. All right, anything else in the world of Oath of the Gatewatch?
Well, I think that the really interesting thing is that just as the set was starting to come out, you started to see people were already starting to play an Eldrazi deck on Magic Online.
Okay.
So there is an Eldrazi deck in Modern. You can look at kind of where it was before Oath of the Gatewatch. You look at the cards that people were playing on Modern. It was kind of a Wasteland Strangler deck. It very much had a processor theme. You're exiling your opponent's cards with things like Path to Exile, Relic of Progenitus, and then turns Wasteland Strangler into quite the good card. Relic also gives you this awesome graveyard disruption ability. So a nice deck. There you see the nice selection of cards. Eye of Ugin and Eldrazi Temple are really the superstars here. Those cards have been legal for a while, but there hasn't really been anything awesome to do with them. And even before Oath of the Gatewatch, people are already starting to play all these cards in Modern. So now that you get Oath on top of this shell, could be awesome.
All right.
Could absolutely be awesome.
Now, the truth is, we could be here with you for an hour going through all the different decks that are in Modern. We're going to try and crunch it down. So you can play aggro, you can play combo, and you can play control. Randy, give us a couple of aggro decks we might be seeing.
Yeah, you got to start with Affinity. This is the boogeyman. I think this is now public enemy number 1. I mean, look, if we were only playing game 1, if there were no sideboards available, I think this would be the best deck in the format, hands down. I mean, it might be the best deck in the format anyway, but it comes out with just this amazing game 1. You dump your hand, you attack super fast. The problem is everybody knows you're going to do it, and Affinity is at its best when no one's really expecting it. Like, you get these tournaments, you get these sort of ebbs and flows in the metagame where, people kind of forget about it and they start trimming on sideboard cards, and then the Affinity deck goes up and crushes people. I don't know that can happen this weekend, but we'll see.
All right, so if I want to be aggro, but I don't want to run into the artifact hate, where might I go?
Burn, baby, burn. And we saw a couple of these in the top 8 at the last Pro Tour. We've seen this deck having reasonable success at the Grand Prix level, but just trying to point red spells at your opponent's face, basically. Lightning Bolt, Lava Spike, 7 times 3 is 21 points of damage. They're going to hurt themselves with their lands, maybe get in a couple of licks with a Goblin Guide. This has proven to be a very, it's a little more resilient than the Affinity deck. It's a little more consistent than the Affinity deck, and a little more interactive at the same time.
Okay, now you've done some analysis for us looking at a whole range of aggro decks. Why don't we take a look now on screen? It's math time, everyone at home.
Yeah,
look at that. There we go.
Luis Scott Vargas put this analysis together. He wrote a great article. Go to Daily MTG. Luis wrote this article last week, just sort of in his column on the Mothership. Mm-hmm. And he talked about how you can look at decks on an axis of speed, interactivity, and resilience. And usually the faster you are, and I put the faster decks over on the left, you're a little less interactive, you're a little less resilient. And a lot of choosing what you want to play in Modern comes down to where you want to be on the spectrum. How much speed do you need? How much interactivity and resilience are you willing to give up? Do you want to be playing, something like a Hate Bear stack or a Token stack that it's slower, but you actually get to make a bunch of decisions and try to interact with what your opponent is up to? Or are you just trying to get your opponent dead as fast as you possibly can? So lots and lots of options, and they all have sort of a little bit of a different character to them.
All right. So that's aggro. Let's move to combo now. If you want to just put a whole flurry of cards together, here's Infect.
Yeah, and I'm going to follow Luis here. Infect is a combo deck.
Yeah.
It looks like an aggro deck. You're kind of attacking with these little... No, you're just looking for a delivery mechanism for your ground swells and your giant growth effects, right? That's all the creatures actually are in this deck. And you can kill very quickly with this deck. You get the right mutagenic growth draw, you can theoretically kill on turn 2, and turn 3 comes up routinely enough that people talk about it. So, you are vulnerable to all the creature removal spells that everybody else has, but other than that, Achilles heel, you're a very, very fast, very good combo deck.
Okay, here's another combo deck. Let's talk about Goryeos Vengeance.
Yeah, this is the scary one. Not the most consistent deck in the world, but if you manage to discard Emrakul, you can actually respond to that reshuffle trigger and put it into play with an instant speed effect like Goryeos Vengeance before it shuffles itself into the library. That little trick sets you up to put giant monsters into play. This Reanimator deck is blisteringly fast when it draws all the right pieces.
Okay, one more, and we've mentioned it already, Tron.
Yeah, I don't know whether to classify this as a control deck or a combo deck.
Right.
It's kind of a combo deck that you have to get the lands put together, but it plays kind of like a control deck. You could put it either place. Fundamentally, it's a big mana deck. And, we'll put it here as a combo deck. You've got to put the lands together, and if you get the right combination of those 3 lands, you assemble the Ursa Tron, and that's where the name comes from. Suddenly, tons of mana and tons of ways that you can really abuse your opponent.
Okay, speed, resilience, interactivity. Let's take a look at the world of combo in Modern. Let's take a look at that for you and see where we think everything sits here.
Yeah, Goryeos Vengeance is the true glass cannon in the format. Blisteringly fast, but that's all it's really got going for it. You see Goryeos Blue there. Starting to see a little bit of these decks that sort of slow themselves down, maybe put some Jace in there as the discard effect, get some blue spells. Maybe you actually can interact with your opponent now, but it takes you a little longer to set things up. Once again, I've got 8 decks on here. I could have expanded the slide a little more. There are tons of decks that are available in Modern, depending on exactly what you want to do with your approach to the format.
Okay, well, Randy and I have been very kind. We've graciously talked to you about aggro and combo. Now we're actually going to talk about the decks we care about, which are, of course, the control decks. Let's talk about Jund, Abzan, depending on your flavor of color.
Sure. Black-Green X is what you hear it called sometimes. That fundamental core of Tarmogoyf and Liliana, Abrupt Decay. Those are very, very good Magic cards. And then splashing white for Siege Rhino and Lingering Souls in particular was the flavor last year at the Pro Tour. People have gone back to Jund because Lightning Bolt is a great card. Maybe this actually is Black-Green Splash colorless in this new Oath of the Gatewatch fueled world. We're definitely going to see this deck. My guess is that Abzan is the best way to build it, but you know what? We'll find out this weekend.
All right, and then what about the Eldrazi? Are we going to see a genuine Eldrazi deck here?
We're going to see it. The question is, have people had time to figure out exactly the right way to build it? There is definitely the tools here for a good Modern deck. It's another one of these like Ursa Tron that kind of fits into the big mana category. Part combo, part control. This one's sort of a little closer to the control side. I hope somebody has put together a great list of it and makes a deep run into day 2. I know we're going to see it at least on day 1. The question is, has anybody actually managed to put a good list together?
Okay, let's look at the balance of how the control decks pan out. And as you can see, obviously, speed is not what their strength is.
No. If you're playing Control, you're trying to maximize interactivity. You should have a very resilient deck, but you are slow. You know, Lantern, I could have given a negative number. That is just Lantern Control. Hey, look, it won a Grand Prix. It should show up, but you're decking your opponent one card at a time if you're playing Lantern Control.
Fantastic stuff. All right, so you can play aggro, you can play combo, you can play Control, but here on the eve of the Pro Tour, if you have a seat, table 1 in round number 4, what are you taking out of the deck box, Randy?
I think it's really hard to build a Control deck when the field is this wide open. Like, we don't really know what the metagame's going to look like, post-bannings, post-oaths, so I don't know that you can play Control unless, like, my dream is my team broke the Eldrazi deck, and we just have an Eldrazi list that we feel spectacular about. You know, barring that, I'd be looking for something consistent. You know what? I'd probably play a burn deck.
All right.
I'd probably play a burn deck.
Well, I can almost guarantee that at least 95% of the field will disagree because you can play anything.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of Modern, right here with Rich and Randy Buehler.